We are live on YouTube, Fanbase, and Twitter. Yay! Hello, everyone. I trust that everyone has had a great day. Oh, and we are also live on Fanbase. I'm looking at Fanbase. I've been talking to them for a little bit, so I forgot to say anything else. Anyway, tonight's lecture, 3 Propositions by Neville Goddard. Hey, Cyber. Cyber, can you hear me? Oh, you haven't read this one yet? 3 Propositions? Ooh, it should be fun. It should be fun. I'm going to pop over to Fanbase real quick. And you guys are good. My mic is open. We're ready to go. Who's on time tonight? Oh, I wonder who that is. Anyway, let us begin, shall we? 3 Propositions by Neville Goddard, 1954. Well, my first proposition is this one. The individual state of consciousness determines the conditions and the circumstances of his life. The second proposition is that man can select the state of consciousness with which he desires to be identified. And the third follows naturally. Therefore, man can be what he wants to be. If the first proposition is true, that the individual's state of consciousness is the sole cause of the phenomena of his life, then the normal, natural question that is asked, why doesn't he change it to a more desirable state if he could change it? Well, that is not as easy as it appears. Today, we hope to give you a technique to make it easier, but man finds it very hard to leave the things to which he has grown accustomed. We are all grown stuck in the habitual. It may seem strange, but a very sordid cartoon appeared years ago. That is, during the last war. You might have seen it. It came out in the New Yorker, and it was by George Price. In it is one single little room, a sink piled high with unwashed dishes, plaster falling from the walls, and these 2 middle-aged people. She sitting on a chair reading a letter, disheveled, matted hair, and he with torn clothes and feet stuck upon the table and socks exposing holes. And the caption of the picture is this: she is reading a letter from her soldier son abroad. He says he's homesick. Now you see the interior of this house. One room, completely disheveled, but the lad was homesick. Now, man finds it difficult to detach himself from the habitual. So this evening, we have brought you these 3 propositions. And I hope I can make it clear that you can, with this knowledge, apply it so that you can realize your every objective. It is the height of folly to expect changes to come about by the mere passage of time. For that which requires a state of consciousness to produce its effect could not be effective without such a state of consciousness. So if I must be in the consciousness of the thing that I am seeking before I find it, then the only thing to do is to acquire that state of consciousness. Most of us do not even know what we mean by state of consciousness. To those who are here for the first time, it is simply meant by state of consciousness the sum total of all that a man believes and accepts and consents to as true. Now, it need not be true. It may be, but it need not be true. It could be false. It could be a half-truth. It could be a lie. It could be a superstition. It could be a prejudice. But the sum total of all that a man believes constitutes his state of consciousness. It is the house in which he abides. And as long as he remains in that house, similar problems will confront him. The circumstances of life will remain the same. He may move physically across the ends of the earth, but he will encounter similar conditions. He can't get away from the house in which he abides. The Bible speaks of these houses as mansions of the Lord. It speaks of them as cities. It speaks of them as rooms, as upper rooms. All kinds of words are used to describe individual states of awareness. And the appeal in the Bible is always to move out and occupy the upper story, meaning to move up to a higher level within one's self. Now, if you do not know the state in which you abide, it's a very simple technique you may employ to discover that state. For the man dwelling in a state, and we all dwell in states, could easily discover the state by listening within himself and observing his own internal mental conversations. For the state is singing its own song, and it reveals itself in man's inner speech. If you will listen attentively and uncritically to what inwardly you are saying, you will discover the state. And it will not surprise you that things are as they are, for you will hear within yourself the cause of the phenomena of life. So that what you are inwardly saying and doing is far more important than what you outwardly know or seemingly outwardly express. So when a man knows what inwardly he is doing, then he can change it. If you have never uncritically observed your reactions to life, if you are totally unaware of your subjective behavior, then you are unaware of the cause of the things in your world. But if you become aware of the state, then you simply go about changing it. Now, here is a technique that I have found most helpful, and I find that it works like a miracle. Anyone can do it. I know that some of you here possibly come from extreme orthodox walks of life, and it may seem strange to you even to be here. But I assure you, you are not alone. Many of your leaders in the orthodox field seek an audience with the speaker. Many a rabbi has been in my home, many a priest, and many a Protestant leader. Many of them. They come to my home for interpretations of the book that publicly they wouldn't dare give an interpretation other than the most extreme literal interpretation. So don't be surprised if you hear things here that might startle you. Your leaders are startled, but this is a technique I have found most helpful. First of all, man stands forever in the presence of an infinite and eternal energy, from which energy all things proceed, but it follows definite patterns. It just doesn't move out of man and crystallize in things in some strange, haphazard manner. It follows a definite track, and the track it follows is laid down by the man himself in his own internal conversations. So, though man is called upon to change his thinking that he may change his world, for we are told, "Be ye transformed by the renewal of your mind." Man can't change his thinking unless he changes his ideas, for he thinks from his ideas. So, if I would change and become transformed, I must lay new tracks, and the tracks I lay are always laid down in my own internal conversation. So, what am I saying now when seemingly I am alone? I can sit in that chair or stand here or walk the streets, and I can't stop talking. Man does not realize that he is talking because he is never still enough to listen to the voice speaking within himself. But inwardly, he is whispering what outwardly is taking place as conditions and circumstances. Most of the things he whispers are negative in justifying his behavior. There's no need to justify. He is excusing delay or excusing failure, or he is arguing, or he is judging harshly, or he is condemning. Many of us have secret affection for our hurts. Many of us have secret affection for hurts. We don't want to be liked by certain people. We just wouldn't like it if they liked us. We just don't want certain things to take place in our world, even though they may bring a greater comfort and a greater satisfaction. Man has a peculiar, strange feeling, a little affection for the feeling of being unwanted or the feeling of being hurt, and he likes to talk about it. Well, try to pull that man out of that habitual state. It would be just as difficult as to keep that soldier boy away from that sordid room. He goes back into the sordid rooms within himself. You don't see dishes unwashed within yourself, but if you could only see the internal psychological state in which most of us abide, we would see a room far dirtier than the one that George Price illustrated in the New Yorker magazine. They are all unwashed plates within us. On the outside, we wash them, but we are told in the Bible we leave the inside unwashed and we become whited sepulchres. Now, if I sincerely desire to change my world, there is no one in my world I need change but myself. So that I don't need to change you as an individual, but I do need to change my attitude towards you. If you dislike me, or if I think you dislike me, or if your behavior offends me, the cause of my offense is not in you and your behavior, but I must look for that cause within myself. Now, if I seriously and I am honest about my search, I will find it, and I will find that inwardly, when I think of you, it is never a pleasant conversation that I carry on with you. So let me sit down now and bring you before my mind's eye. And as I bring you before the mind's eye, let me imagine a conversation which would imply a radical change in my world. Let me bring you up and change my attitude toward you by laying new tracks relative to you. These tracks will then become the tracks across which this eternal energy will pour. An energy which is only thinking, moving across the tracks laid down in my own inner conversations, will result in changes in my outer world. Now, if I repeat the conversations and do it more often, then it becomes a habit. And I will find that when I am about my Father's business in the outer world, I am inwardly, through habit, carrying on these changed and lovelier conversations. Now, a transformation of consciousness will definitely result in a change of environment and conditions. But I mean transformation of consciousness. I do not mean a slight alteration of consciousness like a change of mood. It is nice to change a mood from some unlovely to a lovely, but I want a transformation. And by transformation, I mean that when one state into which I have moved, and move so often that it becomes a habit, and that state grows stable so that it expels from my consciousness all of its rivals, then that central habitual state defines my character and really constitutes my new world. It spells out a transformation. But if I only do it a little bit and return to my former state, then I might have had a temporary lift. But I will not notice radical changes in my outer world. I will notice these changes in my outer world inwardly. I will notice these changes in my outer world if inwardly I have truly changed. Then, without effort on my part, I will find the outer world changing to correspond to the changes that took place within me. So you bear it in mind. I can't stress it too often. I can't give it too great importance, this wonderful thing called man's ability to talk within himself. And without the aid of anyone in the world, sitting alone at home, you can construct a sentence which would imply the fulfillment of the ideal. You can construct a sentence which would imply that a friend I blessed, that she has realized her objective, that the thing you know she wants, she has. So what would she say to you had she realized it? Well, you listen attentively as though you heard, and you will really hear if you are still enough. You will hear as coming from without what really you are whispering from within yourself. Man in this wonderful temple in which all the work takes place, and the outer world is only a projection of the work done within himself. This called present man, unfortunately, is asleep. It is told us so beautifully in the Bible that Adam slept. In the 2nd chapter of Genesis, he was placed into a profound sleep from which he has not been awakened. There's no reference in the Bible where Adam was ever awakened from his sleep, but there is a reference where he awoke, but not as Adam. He awoke as a man, a second man called Christ Jesus. So in Christ, they awake. In Adam, all sleep. But a man who is totally unaware of the mental activity that goes on within him is the one who sleeps as Adam. He doesn't know it. He walks with his eyes wide open. He may be a very important person in the world. He may be wealthy. He may be famous. He may have all the things that you admire. But if he is totally unaware of that mental activity, which is the cause of the phenomena of his life, that man is sound asleep, and he is personified as Adam. And he will read his Bible and think it is a literal story. He will read where Adam was put to sleep, and from Adam a rib was taken, and a woman was formed called Eve. But when a man begins to awake, he realizes that this symbolical Eve of the Bible is only his own emanation, now called by the name of nature. And nature is his slave, and must fashion life about him as he fashions it within himself. But if he is asleep, he fashions it in confusion, but he fashions it anyway, for he uses the very technique that his father used to build a world. He uses speech, he uses inner talking, and that's how this whole vast world was brought into being. So he uses the same technique. He has speech and he has mind, but in the state of sleep, he brings about strange conditions, and he doesn't know he's the cause of the strange things round about him. As he begins to awake, then he awakes only as one being. He awakes as Christ Jesus, and the being called Christ Jesus personified in our Gospels is simply the awakened, loving imagination. Imaginative love, where only love guides, it is incapable of hearing anything but the lovely. When that being begins to awake, he doesn't see things in pure objectivity. He sees everything subjectively related to himself. He is incapable of meeting a stranger. He may meet one for the first time, but he knows it is not really a stranger. That the man had no power to come into this world, save he from within himself drew him. No man comes unto me, save I call him. No man takes away my life, I lay it down myself. You didn't choose me, I have chosen you. Though you seemingly come now for the first moment in my life, you still didn't choose me. I have chosen you. I see then every being subjectively related to myself. So in that state, you become incapable of hurt. You've overcome all the violence that formerly you've expressed in the world when you were asleep. There is no condemnation to the sleeping man. He is dreaming confusion because he doesn't know who he is. But he begins to awake by such techniques as given you this evening. If you take this technique and you try it consciously, for here I am appealing not to the passive mind that passively surrenders to appearances, I am appealing to the Christ in you, which is the active, conscious use of your lovely imagination. So when you sit down and you predetermine what you want to hear, and you listen until you hear it, and you refuse to hear anything other than that, then you are using the one power in the world that awakens a man, and you are using your lovely imagination, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. Here is a lady this past week. She has heard the story of revision. Her husband calls her, and it's a big deal. It runs into a fortune. He had sent off 600 feet of film to Acme, and they've returned the film. Only the first 300 were good. The second 3 were duds, as they call it. Not a thing was on it, a complete blank. Yet, they were up against time. That 600 feet of film had to be on a plane headed for Chicago in the immediate present, less than 12 hours away. It had to be there. That was the contract. And 300 feet, and 300 feet of film taken. No sound appeared, with the whole thing a blank. She sat down when her husband called her, desperately called her. She sat on the bed just where she had received the call, put the receiver up, and sat in the silence until she heard within herself that phone ringing, and across that wire the same voice, but now not an anxious voice, but a tender, loving voice, which was her husband, explaining that the whole thing had been resolved. They had found what seemingly they had lost forever. She sat in the silence for 1 hour and 10 minutes, and there she listened, and she listened until her whole body became still in hearing only what she wanted to hear. And an hour and 10 minutes later, while still in the silence, the phone rang. It's her husband calling to say that Acme just called him to explain and excuse themselves. It was their mistake. They had found the missing 300 feet of film, and there was not a dud. It wasn't a blank. The whole thing was perfect. Now, the average person not knowing this law of revision, or even those knowing it, would have accepted as final the evidence of sense, and receiving news that seemed so factual, they would have gone into a stew, bawled out Acme, and pulled all kinds of wires to correct it. But she heard, and she acted upon it, and that's what I mean when I tell you that a little knowledge, if you carry it out in action, will be far more profitable than much knowledge which you neglect to carry out in action. Now, many of you present, and this is no judgment, you have the same knowledge that this lady has. She's been coming here recently, but she heard. She attended all the meetings at the Eagle. And she's been here. Undoubtedly, she's here this evening. But at least she came the first 2 Sundays, and she hasn't missed one at the Eagle. And having heard the art of revision, she acted upon it. Others heard the art of revision. Have you acted upon it? Did you last night allow the sun to descend upon your wrath? Did you sleep last night with any trouble, any vexation unresolved? Or did you last night truly go to bed having resolved every vexation and trouble of the day? All the little problems, each one must be resolved. You rewrite the play. If you didn't rewrite yesterday's events and make them conform to the ideal you wish you had experienced, then you heard, but you aren't a doer. And so you are told in the Bible, would that ye be doers of the word and not mere hearers only. For if you are a hearer and not a doer, then you are like a man who sees his face in the glass and turns and straightway forgets what manner of man he is. But if you are a doer and not a forgetful hearer, then you shall be blessed with the deed. For you will look into the law of liberty, and you will liberate yourself, and liberating yourself, you shall be blessed with the deed. For those of you who are Bible students and want to check it, read the book of James. You will find that story in the first chapter of the Epistle of James, where he looks in and liberates himself. Well, she liberated herself by listening until she heard exactly what she wanted to hear, and she heard it 1 hour and 10 minutes later. Now, the majority of people, I say, they would not have acted upon it. Through habit, they would have gone into a stew. They would have fumed and fretted, and that very day, had he brought home the negative news, that undoubtedly he would have, they both would have slept, allowing the sun to descend upon their wrath. But now you know that there's not a thing on the outside to change. That first proposition is true, that the man's state of consciousness, which simply means all that he accepts, all that he believes, all that he consents to, that and that alone is the cause of the phenomena of his life. Man can change his state of consciousness, and therefore man can determine the conditions of his life. But the passage of time will not in itself do anything. Time is only a facility for changes in experience, but it cannot produce the change. The passage of time will not in itself do anything. Time is only a facility for changes in experience, but it cannot produce the change. It is simply that which allows change to take place, but it can't produce them. Space gives us the facility for experience and time for changes in experience. But of themselves, they do nothing. We must operate the power. And so the individual, if he doesn't become the operator, then he will wait in vain. So no one here this evening, in fact, no one coming here through the year, should ever allow himself to blame another, ever allow himself to justify failure, for he is only betraying his own lack of the use of this law. Anyone that you listen to who is complaining of a third party, he has no idea how he is betraying himself. He is telling you of his own unwashed dishes within himself, but he doesn't know it. He thinks it is in the one that he is now judging. But as he talks to you, listen attentively and see what must be washed within him, and you aid him. In your own mind's eye, rewrite that script that you heard when you leave him. Just imagine you heard a more lovely conversation than the one you did hear. Just rewrite it for him, and in some strange way, lift him up within you, for that's your task. It's my task. We aren't here to condemn. We are here to redeem. Having awakened, we have found Christ in us as our own imagination, and so our duty, as it is said, Christ's duty is to do the will of him that sent me. And the will of him that sent me is that of all that he has given me, I should lose nothing, but I shall raise it up again. And I raise it up by encountering someone and then finding him down. I raise him up within myself. I simply hear what I want to hear from him. Now, my voice you are hearing this evening, you could take the tone, listen attentively, and you will hear this tone within you. When you hear the tone within you, then put upon that tone the word that you want to hear. And having put it upon, listen and do not move until you hear this tone conveying these words. But make them noble, Don't take that tone and put upon it any word outside of the word which would imply a dignified, noble state, because you are not hurting anyone but self. If you take someone and you put words upon that tone or that voice, and the words do not imply a noble spirit, then you are only allowing that being to be down within you. You are not really performing your duty. So here this evening, believe these propositions, and then having believed them, do something about it. Go out and take what we have told you concerning inner speech. It is truly the greatest of arts. You listen and only hear what you want to hear. You take your imaginary hand and put it into the hand of a friend, the imaginary hand of a friend, and there you congratulate him on his good fortune. If you want one to congratulate you, you allow yourself to be congratulated. You don't bend the head, you hold it high and accept the congratulation. And when you congratulate him, imagine that he is fully conscious of the good that is already his, and he accepts that congratulation, and make the contact real. That is truly entering the kingdom of heaven. For you enter the kingdom, and the kingdom is within you. It's not without. And you always enter the kingdom by a loving, knowing communion. You can enter the kingdom at every moment of time. Ride the streetcar, ride the buses, and with all the talking and gossiping, you can enter the kingdom and bless a friend by just imagining the friend is with you, and you are putting your hand into his and congratulating him on the good news you've heard concerning him, and listen as though he has answered in kind. And in that moment, you have actually blessed him. He may be 1,000 miles away, but from that moment on, things begin to stir within his world, for you have brought about a change within the structure of his mind. And every modification of the structure of a man's mind must result in corresponding outer changes. Let's say that again to you. He may be 1,000 miles away, but from that moment on, things begin to stir within his world, for you have brought about a change within the structure of his mind. And every modification of the structure of a man's mind must result in corresponding outer changes. So you bring about these lovely changes within you. Look at the testimonial, one you heard this evening. Well, here's a pile of letters, and this is really a tight pile. It is one of the biggest piles I think that you have ever received here. And this week's mail, I can't begin to tell you what a thrill it is to receive, one after the other, not begging for help anymore, but giving praise and thanks for the principle that brought the help into their world. I can't tell you how many in the last 2 weeks have received an increase in income, increase of position, a better state of health. Things happened because they did something about it. They were not just warming a seat here on Sunday morning and waiting for things to happen by association. They produced the thing by producing it first within themselves. Cyber. So here, this appeals to men who are big enough to stand on their own feet, men who want spiritual meat and who have outgrown the milk given to sleeping man. So if you want the literal concept, you are still asleep, and this really would not be the place to get it. For from this platform, you are going to be given meat, spiritual meat, for you must go out and do something about it. If you have the greatest knowledge in the world concerning foods and you didn't eat, well, you would die of starvation. And so it's not the knowledge of it, it's the application of it that counts. It's not the knowledge of it, it's the application of it that counts. Now, this coming week, we start tomorrow. And it's an interesting one for those who like their Bible, those who would like to put their mental teeth into it tonight and come tomorrow night with some intuitive knowledge of it. It's the 49th chapter of Genesis. You'll find many of them. I'll quote tomorrow. But in the 49th chapter of Genesis, here is what it says. First of all, he calls his sons together to tell them their future, and there are 12 of them. It's Jacob calling his sons. But the fifth one, when he calls the fifth one, he tells him the scepter shall never drop, shall never depart from your hand, never, not in eternity. His name is Judah, the one that fathered the line that flowered in Christ Jesus. When you read the genealogy as given to us in Matthew and Luke, then it is said of Judah that he took his foal and he tied it to a vine, and he took the colt of an ass and tied it to a good vine. And then he washed his garments in wine, and he washed his clothes in the blood of grapes. And his eye was red with wine, and his teeth white with milk. Well, now, those of you who still would like to read that literally, you may get some satisfaction out of washing your clothes in wine. I don't. I'd rather drink it. But some wash theirs in the blood of grapes, and then the teeth white with milk, and the eyes bloodshot with wine. Well, now, that was the one who fathered out of Thamar the twins that brought forth the line that flowered in Christ Jesus. So go back and read the genealogy of Judah, and then see what Judah did and how he took two animals. One was a foal and one was a colt. Now, I won't tell you the interpretation. You exercise your intuitive faculty, and you come tomorrow night and you hear what we have to say about the amethyst or the wine stone. How a man must make the amethyst, how a man must take his garments, a thing that clothes the mind of man, and wash them in the blood of grapes. How a man not only must do it, but his eye must become equally bloodshot with wine, and his teeth white with milk. And we will show you tomorrow night why they placed upon him the scarlet robe, and then placed him upon the most mystical of all, the purple robe. So as they placed them up to the very final act, was the placing of the purple robe upon the man who had awakened, who is now ready to ascend on high, higher levels within himself. But you can't ascend until you first make the purple robe. And although we have orders in this world who have scarlet robes and purple robes, no man can make it for you. And so it cannot be woven in any factory. It has to be woven from the factory within yourself. So tomorrow night, for those who are vitally interested in going deeper into the mysteries, our subject is the 12th, an amethyst. Ooh. The very last act of a man, the 12th, for there are only 12. Then comes the most, I would say, the least precious of all stones in the eyes of a man. But in the eyes of God, it's the most precious. And it's not the little thing you find among the stones. It's the one you find within yourself. So that is tomorrow's subject. And there concludes 3 Propositions, Neville Goddard, 1954. Listen, this was a most beautiful lecture. If you hear him, he says, man finds it difficult to detach himself from the habitual. We're creatures of habit. But you see, you know the law of rhythm now, don't you? What is a habit? A thing you do the same way every time. So you're not stuck with the old. You can create the new. He says, now if you don't know the state in which you abide, it's a very simple technique you may employ to discover that state. For the man dwelling in a state, and we all dwell in states, could easily discover the state by listening within himself and observing his own internal mental conversations. For the state is singing its own song, and it reveals itself in man's inner speech. If you will listen attentively and uncritically to what inwardly you are saying, you will discover the state. Oh, yeah, I know. Come a little closer, darling. Mm. See, it says, he may move physically across the end of the earth, but he will encounter similar conditions. He can't get away from the house in which he abides. The Bible speaks of these houses as mansions of the Lord. All right, sweet girl, come. Come. All right, you're right here with Mama now. You're right here with Mama. Now, here is a technique I have found most helpful, and I find that it works like a miracle. Anyone can do it. Anyone can do it. First of all, man stands forever in the presence of an infinite and eternal energy, from which energy all things proceed, but it follows definite patterns. It just doesn't move out of man and crystallize in things in some strange haphazard manner. It follows a definite track. And the track it follows is laid down by the man himself in his own internal conversations. So though man is called upon to change his thinking, that he may change his world, for we are told, be ye transformed by the renewal of your mind. Man can't change his thinking unless he changes his ideas, for he thinks from his ideas. So if I would change and become transformed, I must lay new tracks. And the tracks I lay are always laid down in my own internal conversation. So I trust that you understand that a little bit more. I trust it makes sense. Is that the next one, Cyber? Good Friday, Easter? I thought it was the 12th. Look, I'll go and I will look it up. Yes. The 12th in Amethyst. Wait, listen. Child, you can't get any closer. I know. So I trust it makes sense for you tonight that to discover the state that you're in, listen to your inner conversations. But remember the woman and her husband. Neville said, if we don't revise, we lose our cool. But she didn't lose her cool. He said, what did she do? She sat there after she hung up that phone and heard it from the beginning the way she wanted to hear it. It took her an hour and 10 minutes to hear what she wanted to hear. It took her that long. Right? But you see, sometimes we're in a hurry. A hurry. Well, let's not be in a hurry. Take your time to sit there and hear what you want to hear. You must decide what that is that you want to hear. So, Cyber also says, Henrietta is calmly clucking up a storm tonight. He says, I like it as much as I do the waterfall. It's chicken ASMR. Sorry, Cyber. Sonia, darling, I see you. Marjorie, I see you. And for the others who've not made themselves known in the chat, I see you as well. So Good Friday, Easter. Okay, I will, that's going to be in this one. Good Friday, Easter. Got it. Yeah, 1954. Okay. I will modify the post or the live stream for tomorrow. And that's the one we'll do. We'll do the continuation. Well, I was going to do fourfold vision tomorrow. Right? I was going to do that. But we'll see. I'm going to read that one tonight. And I'll read it tonight and see for the Good Friday one. From the fourfold vision. Here's the last paragraph from fourfold vision. Do not postpone your dreams, and do not think that because you heard what to do, your desires will come to pass. It's so easy to hear the truth and postpone the doing. But I urge you to be like my friend. Stop postponing and do what you want to have done. For if you do, it will come to pass. Right? Let me flip over here to Fanbase. Hey, Fanbase. Oh, wow. Y'all are up in here tonight. But I trust that that makes sense to you. Revision, like he says, the scripture, don't let the sun go down on your wrath, your anger. What is he saying? I remember from many of his previous lectures, he says, what if you got a letter with bad news? Sit there and revise it to say something else. What would you have preferred to hear instead? Well, sit there and hear it, and don't move till you hear it. Just like the woman, she sat there for an hour and 10 minutes. Shoot, I would have been scratching after 15 seconds, but hey, I digress. But you see, that's what I'm trying to say to us. When do we take the time to just sit there and listen? Oh, but I have ADHD. I have ADD. I have this, I have that. But you notice we can sit on social media. Sorry. I'm not coming for anybody. I'm just saying that's what we do. I'm not talking to you. I'm speaking to myself. Right? It's what we do. So the encouragement is this. Tonight, practice revision. It doesn't have to take you forever to do it. Just practice. If there was something that happened throughout the day and you didn't like it, revise it right there and then on the spot. That's what I like to do. If I'm out and about and if I walk away and I'm like, snap, I go back and I revise it right there as to how I wanted it to go. Or you can lay on your bed, and he always would replay the day from the last thing that happened to the first, is how he practiced focusing his mind. So you see, having a focused attention, meaning your attention is fixed in a particular location and you're not letting it wander. If it starts to wander, bring it back. Listen, it could wander 50 times. Bring it back all 50. Because you know why? Your brain will finally say to you, I surrender. And it will stay where you put it. But if you don't remain diligent and persistent to sit there and allow yourself to hear what it is you want to hear. I'm going to say it. I don't know if she's here tonight. I'm going to presume that she is on Twitter. I'm not going to call your name, baby. I'm not going to call your name. But she said to me, I hear your voice in my head. I'm like, yeah, that kind of scares me a little bit. But I understand what she means, because I hear Doula's voice in my head all the time, especially when I talked a little bit. I say, hey, girl, how you doing, baby? That's Doula. You listen, you spend 5 minutes with Doula, you'll have a whole conversation in a Southern accent in your head. You see? So what Neville is saying to you is, if you want to hear a particular thing, hear it in a particular voice. Hear it in a particular voice. What would they say to me? Then you put the words in their mouth. You hear it. And you don't just hear it once, but you hear it over and over and over and over. There's something that happens when it takes root, yeah? There's a subtle shift that happens when you go from, um, it really, I can't explain it other than you feel a shift when you go from just repeating it for rote memory, but you're actually so engrossed in it, you don't even know time has passed. It's like that good book you can't put down, that page turner. And you're like, dude, man, it's been 4 hours and I've been sitting here this whole time reading. Yeah, you've just been so wrapped up in it. Allow yourself to become that way with whatever that thing is you want to hear. Congratulations on your new ... Whatever that is. Remember the other lecture when he said, even if you hear somebody gossiping about you and how jealous they are of you, let them gossip. You know why? Because then it confirms to you that you did receive what it is. They couldn't have spoken about you otherwise. So if you hear, oh my God, who does she think she is? Like, I can't like stand her. She's like so lucky. Every good thing always happens to her. Okay, if you hear that, rejoice. You know why? Because you did it. You brought it out of imagination and you gave it form, and they are confirming the form that you are interacting with. See how that makes you feel when kind of sort of you just want to, you say, and you pop your collar. You put that work in. You must celebrate yourself. So tonight, as you go to bed, whatever that thing is, whoever's closest to that you want to tell, it doesn't matter. Is it the one you love the most? Is it your journal? Is that your closest friend? Well, then share the good news. But don't just share the good news, because you wouldn't just stand before me and say, you'll never believe what happened. Nah, you be jumping up and down. You be hooting and hollering, and your body will just be so lit up, and you're hot and you're sweaty and you're just like, you're so excited. But that's how you would behave. So work yourself up in that way, but mentally. And hear it. And the more you hear it, the more it fires you up. That, my beautiful friends, concludes. Oh, I just looked into the room. Hello, Black Buddha. As I was reading that lecture, I said to myself, I wonder if Black Buddha is going to come tonight. Because the lecture goes along with everything we spoke about earlier today. And I had that lecture chosen since Friday because Marjorie was the one who suggested that. So you see, there are no coincidences.
I was wondering if you might have influenced her.
No, she gave me that suggestion on either Thursday or Friday of last week. And so it was just scheduled for today. So there aren't any coincidences. Everything is as it should be. So practice what you've heard. And you know where to find it on YouTube. You can always catch the replay there. Oh, hey, girl. No, I'm not talking a little bit. I'm talking to thick.
Hello, how are you?
Good, and how are you, sweetie? It's good to see you.
Yes, it's good to be back.
Of course, it's brilliant to have you back, darling. Yes. I can't say I've missed you because I see you on the other platforms and I communicate with you there. So, but it's good to see you on this one too. Right? But I trust tonight that it makes sense for you and that you will test it out. What did he say? Are you going to just be a hearer of the word? You just going to hear it and go, that doesn't work. That's just nonsense. That's poppycock. That's what you're going to say? Or are you going to become curious and say, what did he say again? He said, be clear about what it is I want to hear. Okay, well, I'm going to hear it. And that woman sat there on her bed for 1 hour and 10 minutes and she heard. Listen, you have to know she's human and her mind wandered. You have to know that. So her mind wandered, she brought it back. So if yours wanders, bring it back and hear what you want to hear. Hear what it is you want to hear. You don't take no for an answer. Can you imagine 300 feet of blank tape? And she was like, no, I refuse that. In other words, she said, I rebuke you, is what she said. And she was like, nope, I'm going to sit here and all 600 have been accepted. And she heard the phone call and her husband's voice the way she wanted to hear it. And that is what she did. So the encouragement again, my beautiful friends, is to practice. He says, practice. I want to see if there's... It is nice to change a mood from some unlovely to a lovely, but I want a transformation. And by transformation, I mean that when one state into which I have moved, and moved so often that it becomes a habit, and that state grows stable, so that it expels from my consciousness all of its rivals, then that central habitual state defines my character and really constitutes my new world. It spells out a transformation. Listen to this part. But if I only do it a little bit, if I only do it a little bit and return to my former state, then I might have had a temporary lift, but I will not notice radical changes in my outer world. I will notice these changes in my outer world if inwardly I have truly changed. Then without effort on my part, I will find the outer world changing to correspond to the changes that took place within me. And that is where I will leave you tonight, my beautiful friends. Let me say goodbye to you. Who is all here? I don't know who's here on Facebook and Twitter. Cyber is on YouTube. Asanya. Hey, Marjorie. And I'm going to presume Jeff is here too, but I don't know. So I see you guys. It was lovely to spend time with you. Who's here on Fanbase? Markia is here. Comrade, Miss Deborah, Oxamite, Black Buddha, Mgenie, Matthias, Marquise. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'll see you in the morning. Rest well, my beautiful friends. Rest well.
In Marquis' words, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
That's awesome.
Osmosis.
Yeah. What, Marquise?
I went to hook a brother up. He said, hey.
Oh, hey, hook a brother up. It's good to see you. All right, y'all. I'll see you later. Toodles.